people are people, and you will have people who will pick up an extreme horror novel and be like, oh my gosh, this is so crazy. Like, yeah. Hello. This week I have had a bit of an extreme horror binge. So I have 5 books that I've read that I want to talk to you, that I need to talk to you about. Before we get into the video, just a small disclaimer. The thing about extreme horror is that it's somewhat of a subjective description. No? Sometimes books are self-described as extreme horror, but then when you read them, you're kind of surprised that they're described that way. It's hard to say exactly where the threshold is. There certainly is a spectrum. Some of these books are definitely pretty far on the extreme side of the spectrum, but some of them are closer to the other side. The first book I want to talk about is called My Vice is Your Unfathomable Agony. I said it right. Hell yeah. It is by Otis Bateman. This is a new author that I have not read before, and I was not disappointed, let me tell you. This book was such a hoot. It's about a mob boss. Of course, it's the perfect plot device for an extreme horror book, right? So in this story, you have a mob boss named Rosario. His daughter's fiance is driving a delivery truck. It ends up getting robbed. He doesn't try to stop the robbery or anything like that, but they decide to eliminate him anyway, not realizing his connection to Rosario, again, the mob boss. So basically, these people are going to pay the price. Rosario contacts a man named Hardware Tony. Hardware Tony is known for being just ruthless. He doesn't just torture people, he is like an artist of torture. That is the basic plot of this book. Rosario gets members of the mob to gather up the men who were part of this heist and their families, and they bring them to Hardware Tony, and then Hardware Tony just goes to town on these people. A few things that stood out to me about this book: the pop culture references in it. The author seems, at least in this book, he uses phrases like cavalcade of carnage, Looney Tunes tool tyrant, or mulched by the mower. Like those, I think it's alliteration. He uses those a lot. I just really got the sense reading this that he was having fun writing it, which made it fun to read. The book didn't take itself too seriously, but it still was gory. It was still what you're looking for with an extreme horror. It's gross and gory and all that. It makes you cringe and it makes you like, oof, but it's not the sort of thing that's going to haunt you 2 weeks from now. I definitely want to read this author again. The second book I want to talk about is called Butterscotch, and this is by Brito Guerrero. This is also a new author that I have not read before. Butterscotch is self-described on the cover as an extreme horror story. That being said, I do think this is an example of it falling onto the lighter side of the spectrum. I have mixed feelings about Butterscotch. Very strong mixed feelings. So we have our character, Zia. Xia, I think Zia is how we're pronouncing it. It starts off and she has no memory of what goes on. She wakes up by the side of a lake. The clothing that she's wearing is damaged and blood-stained. She can see she has like rope burns around her wrists and bruises, and she's sore, but she has absolutely no recollection. She has no memory of where she is or how that happened. In the middle of nowhere with no idea how she got there. She sees a house. There's kind of that awkward moment, right? Of, okay, well, this house could be my salvation. I need help. I'm injured. I'm confused. But what if these people are the people who hurt me? She doesn't know, and she's scared, and so she's like, well, if I don't go to this house, I could just get lost in the woods. She really has no idea where she is. So she ends up going to the house and finds out the hard way that that was the wrong choice. And we'll just leave it at that. I was enjoying this so much. I was having such a good time. I was emotionally connected to this character, to this book. There were parts where I was like holy shit. Like I was really like taken aback by like I was emotionally invested in this story and in this character. It took a turn at the last like 10%. I didn't like the ending. Basically, the last 10% of the book, it teases you into thinking that they're going to do a certain like plot device, which I was like, no, I was already upset. I was like, don't do it. Don't do it. Don't. No. No. And then it was like, haha, faked you out. We're going to do a worse one, actually. And then I was even more upset. It was a very frustrating feeling because I was enjoying it so much. If I had been more indifferent to it leading up to that point, I think I just would have been less invested. I wouldn't have cared as much. But because that wasn't the case, I was upset. I did not like the ending. So, would I recommend this book? Just because I didn't like the ending doesn't mean that you might not. The extreme elements definitely lean more into the gross factor. It does have some scenes of violence, but it is more of the gross. If you let yourself, you'll care. You'll care about this character. It made me feel something. That's something I'm looking for. That's one of the reasons why I like reading extreme horror, because it makes me feel something. Even if that turned into anger at the end, it still made me, and like frustration, it still made me feel something. And so I think for that alone, and for how much I was enjoying it up until that point, I would still recommend it. And to be fair, I can see what the author was going for. I can see what she was going for. It just wasn't, you know, what I wanted her to be going for. I wanted her to be going for something else. I would definitely try her again. So there's that. Our next book is by an author that I have read before. This one is called No One Rides for Free by Judith Sonnet. I read one of her stories, Magic, a few months back. So this is my second time reading her. So this story is about a woman named Jody who is on a road trip with her 2 adult children, taking them to college. When she runs into a gas station, a man infiltrates her car. Doesn't realize that there's a man in the car until she has driven away because her kids are too scared to alert her. Miss Judith Sonnet. You good? Are you good? It's like, oh my goodness. Much like Magic, this leans heavily into essay and violence. It is also gross, but it definitely leans into the sexual violence quite a lot. The first half is the build-up and the second half is the payoff. 60% of the way into the book, they have a second warning. My thought reading it was like, okay, was that really necessary? Like, it's an extreme horror novel. But then again, I'm sure that these poor authors have had to deal with people being upset that the books are actually extreme. So I can understand why, you know, she maybe felt the need to do that. Unless it's literally just there trying to hype people up, I don't know. Now this also said in the afterword that this was the result of a 10-day challenge. Her other book, Magic, was also the result of a 10-day challenge. This was written in 10 days and I feel like that shows a little bit. I want to read more of her because I want to read something that isn't a 10-day challenge. I want to read something from her that she takes her time and makes it as good as it can be. I'll have to do a little bit more research next time to make sure that I'm achieving that. It's nice to know that she is consistent in the sense of when she says extreme horror, she means it. Book number 4 is also by an author that I have read once before. This is called Bluejay, and it's by Megan Stockton. I just recently read Lovely, Dark, and Deep. Bluejay is not described on the cover as being extreme horror, but when you read the afterword, it's referenced that it was her attempt at entering that zone. We have Noah, Jack, and Phil. They are friends who are into horror and gore. It's kind of the thing that they bond over, and they are constantly trying to one-up each other with like who can showcase the grossest thing and all of that. One thing leads to another, and they are able to go to this club, which they are under the impression is like a torture simulation situation. It's all fake. It's all for show. They go there, there's like a menu where you pick out what kind of drugs you want. You pick out, you know, do you want someone who's over 18 or under 18? Do you want to torture them? Do you want to, you know, have frisky time with them? Like what is it that you want to do, and how high do you want to be when you do it? So they just find out the hard way that it's not fake. and it's just them trying to get themselves out of this situation that they have found themselves in. What I appreciate about Bluejay is that this is more character driven than I think you would see in your typical extreme horror book. They each have their own personalities, of course, but you also see the friendship dynamic that they have going into the club, and you get to see how it changes. Like these guys who like to act like they're so tough and nothing gets to them and all of that, you throw them into a real situation and you get to see how, oh, well, this guy who was acting all tough is actually a big old baby. You get to see how the friendship dynamic changes when you are actually under pressure. It was done in a very intriguing, believable way. I think that that's something, is that this one has a little more depth to it. Those friendship dynamics, you have the testing of loyalty. When you're trying to survive, how far are you willing to drag someone along who's slowing you down? This one I would definitely recommend. I enjoyed this one a lot. I think it's interesting. You compare something like Bluejay to My Vice is Your Unfathomable Agony. I think that they are both above average extreme horror books for opposite reasons. Bluejay is above average because of the characters, because of the connections that you make, because you care about these people actually, and because of the intricacies and the depth that she kind of achieves through the story. My Vice is Your Unfathomable Agony doesn't really have that, but it's above average in terms of the execution of the horror elements, if that makes sense. Like, it's done in a way that's exciting and fun and keeps your interest. Both of those books were my favorites out of the ones that I read. So depending on what you tend to prefer or lean towards, I would recommend those for those reasons. And the last book that I want to talk about. This is also by a new author to me. This is called Grandpappy. This is by Patrick C. Harrison III. This was an experience. This was unlike any extreme horror book I have read so far. This was a fever dream. The plot. We have this guy, Charles. And Charles goes because his mother and father are going to go on vacation. However, they are the caregivers for his grandfather. So he goes to his grandfather, his grandpappy's house, to watch his grandpappy so his parents can go on vacation for 2 weeks. Grandpappy is on hospice. The nurse comes once a day. The nursing assistant comes twice a day to take care of his needs and whatnot. But he is bedbound and he doesn't speak. It's not a situation where Charles is really interacting with him very much. He's just kind of there to turn him in bed when the nurses aren't there, to, if his catheter fully gets full, empty it, that sort of stuff. To just sort of be someone there in case something's needed. This book was like an amalgamation of weird stuff at first, and you weren't sure if the main character was just kind of, I don't want to say dumb, but like he would say or do things and you're like, okay, are you mean or just dumb, or like what's the vibe here? And you're not really sure. It very quickly becomes clear that the way that this story is being told to you is not a linear, accurate description of events. And it's not clear what's causing that. Is our character an unreliable narrator? Certainly. Why though? Is he simply mentally ill? Is he extremely high? Is there a CO2 leak in the house? What the hell is going on? We don't know why. We don't know why. We just know that things are very confusing. Weird things are happening that don't make sense. He's hallucinating, presumably. He's seeing things that would not exist in the real world, in the way he's seeing them at least. It almost seems sort of like time jumps at certain points in the book. Something will be there and he won't know why, and then later in the book, you see him put that thing in that place. If you want to read this, you need to be prepared to just let it happen to you. Just let it happen to you. Don't try to understand it. Don't try to control it. Just let it be in control and do what it's going to do to you, because you can't control this beast. You cannot make sense of it. You can't. It's not what it is, So if you're not prepared to just let this be what it is and let it be an experience that is not going to be nicely wrapped up with a bow, then this is not the book for you. There's not like a clear-cut explanation for the things that he is seeing, hallucinating, experiencing, whatever. There are times in the book where it references memories, and it's really not clear to me if the memories are supposed to be real or not. Because if the memories are real, it would possibly serve as an explanation as to why this character is such a terrible person. But also, are they real? Because a lot of this other stuff isn't real. Certainly. Not at least in the way it's being described. The best example that I could give you off the top of my head is that there is a dog in the story. There's like a sentence that says the dog went straight into the hall. And I misread it at first. I thought that it said the dog went straight into hell. And I didn't even question it. I didn't even hesitate. I just kept going. I just kept reading. I didn't even realize I had made a mistake. That's the sort of vibe that this book is, that you would read something like that and not realize that you had made an oopsie. It's gross. It has the sexual violence to it as well. I finished this book this morning, so I'm still reeling a bit, if I'm being real with you. But it is an experience. If you're still here, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. And maybe I'll see you the next time around. Bye. Universally accepted as extreme horror